studio is Vincent Song, a football blogger. And Vincent, you're Vice President of the official Arsenal China Supporters Club. And joining us from Coventry in the British Midlands, we can say hello to Professor Simon Chadwick, who's Chair in Sports Business Strategy at Coventry University Business School. Vincent, I want to start with you. You were just telling me you're fairly recently graduated, but you're making it your life's work to bring the Chinese football fans to the UK to show them what can be done. And we were talking about why the interest in football in China. Do you think it's a lot to do with the president?
Well, I think it is. I mean, football has always been a huge interest in China, but I think more so in recent years, and I think that is primarily down to Mr. Xi, the president, being a massive football fan.
And what does it mean if you're a student in China? I mean, is it encouraged? Is it played at school yet?
Right. It's, I think it's changing in recent years. I have to say that in the past it has not been ideal, because I do feel that grassroots football in China in the past has been mainly neglected. But I think that more and more money is currently being put into grassroots football, and I believe that the Chancellor here in the UK, George Osborne, he has just pledged $3 million into investing into grassroots football in China. So I think that obviously this is mainly down to President Xi, but I hope that this could be an ongoing thing, because I do like to see this change in the football in China.
It's obviously very good news for you. Let's bring in Professor Simon Chadwick at this point. Simon, as we see the Chinese president touring a football club here, there's an economic point to this as well, isn't there, in a sense that Britain can help China?
This time last year, the Chinese government announced a plan to create what will become, in the end, the biggest sport industry in the world. So there's an $845 billion plan in place that China will become the biggest sports economy by 2025 in the world. So from that point of view as well, this is a very pertinent and a highly relevant trip to the UK. Obviously, football plays a very important part of that, because China wants to host and hopefully win the World Cup from their point of view. And given Britain and particularly England's prominence on the world football stage, there's a clear business and commercial opportunity there for English football.
Vincent, it's often controversial when you look at, say, the European League, that people don't have homegrown players, you import the best talent. But in China, there's a quota system, isn't there? Yes,
there is. Actually, in the Chinese Super League, each team, each club is allowed to have 5 foreign players in their team. So I think this does help. And now recently with the money that's been pumped into the game, I think it does help the growth of Chinese football, especially at the top level, quite a lot, because you have raised the standards to play in the league. One of the clubs, Guangzhou, they have recently won the Asian Champions League, so that has raised the level of football, of professional football in China completely.
Simon, how good would you say that level is in China right now?
Clearly, Chinese football is not at the level of European football or South American football, and this is why I think the president is paying close attention to football in China at the moment. Obviously, you have the People's Republic. They don't play right now the people's game particularly well, and so their kind of medium to long-term plan is to play better, to bid for the World Cup, and in the end to win the World Cup.
And to do that, Vincent, of course, you need bright young players coming in. If a Chinese teenager says to their parents, I really want to be a footballer, what kind of reaction would they get now?
Well, I mean, that's a very tricky question, really, because of I think it's to do with a few things, probably due to our culture and also the one-child policy in football. I do think that parents and teachers and in China is generally quite conservative. This means that some people view like being a sportsman as sort of like a risky path to take in life. So I think as of now, I think kids are still in general discouraged to be involved in professional football, especially from a very young age. But obviously I think that if we want to win the World Cup, which would take generations and generations, because football is different. I mean, football requires passion and raw talents. We cannot manufacture football players. We manufacture a lot of gymnasts, we manufacture a lot of Olympic gold medalists, but I do not think that football is a sport which you can manufacture players at a very top level. So I think it will take generations for us to change it from the grassroots, get more people playing football, and then just the whole culture will have to change.
You've really put your finger on it there, I think. And Simon, we have to ask you, what can the Chinese do then to nurture actual talent?
I think the example of Guangzhou Evergrande has just been mentioned. The Evergrande Real Estate Corporation has recently started a soccer academy in China, one of the biggest in the country. And I think what that's trying to do is to develop, nurture, create this top-level playing talent that we've already talked about, while at the same time giving these kids a really good education. So they're kind of simultaneously satisfying what the parents, Chinese parents, want from their children, but at the same time satisfying the country in terms of their sporting aspirations. I think one of the other things too about China is there's been a recent corruption purge by the president in football, and it's very important that they clean up their act. I know there's a great deal of cynicism in China amongst normal fans, normal people about the state of Chinese football, so I think there's a governance issue. I think there's also a broader issue too around FIFA as well, particularly if there is going to be a World Cup bid. And I know that China is pulling back right now from intervening in the Chinese Football Association, which certainly in FIFA terms is very important, because if FIFA perceives that there's political interference in domestic associations, FIFA can actually suspend a domestic association. So I think we're now in the midst of quite a serious and fundamental culture change that I think will ultimately lead to Chinese football moving on from its current position.
Vincent, that's really important, isn't it? We've spent so much of the last few months talking about football and corruption.
Yep. Absolutely. I think corruption still lies in the game in China. It certainly has been in the past. 10 years ago, I mean, people have been jailed for corruption in football. I do think that, however, with more money being pumped into football, I think it helps to fight corruption, because there is more at stake. The players are being paid more, there's more money in the game, there's less incentive for players to actually be swayed. And yep.
Well, Vincent Song, thank you. And Simon, I just want to ask you one more question. When you were talking about raising talent, I suppose the United States is an interesting model to look at, because there you get scholarships to some very good universities on the grounds of sporting talent. Maybe that's the kind of model to follow.
I know for a fact that the Chinese Football Association and the Chinese government right now are looking at alternative ways of developing talent, and I think the United States college model is one that they've taken a very close look at. They've also taken a close look at European football, and in particular what's happening in countries like Germany and to a certain extent England too. They're also looking at Japan, because 20 years ago arguably Japanese football was in the same position as Chinese football is in now. So I think ultimately what we're going to see in terms of talent development and the retention and success of elite level talent is some kind of hybrid model that meshes the best features of the United States, possibly with some European features in there, but with reference to Japanese football as well.
Well, this is a great discussion to have had. Simon Chadwick, Vincent Song, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And do stay with us here on BBC World News, still to come.